Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Orly Shapiro. I'm Chief Technical Advisor and Remote Sensing Specialist at FAO headquarters. And thanks again for joining. So I will be moderating this session on mangroves and more specifically multi-scale mangrove monitoring with specific experiences from countries, global overviews, and everything to get you interested in mangrove monitoring on multiple scales. Next slide, please. So why are we here today? Why are we talking about mangroves? We know they're very critical for millions of people in terms of livelihoods, climate mitigation, biodiversity conservation. They're really an important foundation for so many people's lives. I don't know if you've ever been to a mangrove, but they're actually pretty miserable places to be. They're full of mud and crocodiles, bees, and horrible environments. But so luckily, from remote sensing and satellite imagery, we can easily map and monitor them. So this webinar will present some of the tools developed by FAO and partners with cutting-edge methodologies and state-of-the-art approaches to monitor mangroves at both national scales, which is relevant for, let's say, REDD or reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation, climate mitigation, any sort of national needs, as well as global projects. So looking at really the global status of mangroves, where we're gaining them, where we're losing them, and where are the hotspots of change. So I'll just briefly discuss the agenda. We'll have opening remarks from Thomas Hofer at FAO. Ken Shono will set the scene in terms of where we are, what is the importance and drivers behind the need to monitor mangroves. Next, Andreas Vollrath from FAO will present some of the FAO developed tools, notably from Open Forest Toolbox and CPAL on how to map and monitor mangroves. And this will be followed by several case studies. So we have case studies from Kenya presented by Faith Mutwiri and Marceline Ojwala. A great also case study from Myanmar by Lorena Hoyas from FAO and Patrick Oswald and Tiha also from FAO. And then some information on the regeneration and restoration efforts in Saudi Arabia from Dr. Al-Zaman and Mohammed Awad. And finally, a nice connection between the observations and linkages with the global policy space from Byom Sik from the Ramsar Convention. And we hope we'll have enough time for Q&A and a lively round of discussions before the closing remarks. I'd like to ask you to please use the Q&A section to put in your questions. You'll see at the top of your screen, there's a Q&A button. You can put in your questions during the presentations. Our team will do the best to answer them live, or we can also upvote and vote for questions to be answered live by our presenters. Please use that button whenever possible. The chat is really reserved just for logistics and info. And once again, please don't share any personal details or contact info. This webinar will be shared widely and publicly, and we do want to protect your private information. So with all of that out of the way, I'd like to give the floor to our next presenter, to Thomas Hofer, who's going to welcome you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurélie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, all participants joining us from across the world. On behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, I would like to warmly welcome you to this session of our mangrove monitoring webinar series. And the topic today is on multi-scale mangrove monitoring tools and experiences for climate action. So monitoring is actually the key word for today. Mangroves, as you all know, are amongst the most productive ecosystems actually on the planet. They provide invaluable ecosystem services that directly contribute to livelihoods, support biodiversity, and play a crucial role in combating climate change. Let me focus just on two of these. The first one is that these unique ecosystems sequester carbon up to 10 times more rapidly than terrestrial forests, so up to 10 times more rapidly, making them indispensable for countries striving to meet their climate goals and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The second service has to do with protection of coastlines from storms and to reduce erosion. So mangroves are a vital natural buffer against the growing impacts of climate change and threat of disasters. Yet mangroves, as we all know, unfortunately continue to be under pressure from land use change, climate change, and natural disasters. Now, sorry, dear colleagues, now this and the coming year are very critical for climate efforts, as we all know, making mangrove monitoring ever more important. As countries are preparing to update their nationally determined climate commitments, the NDCs, the adaptation plans and climate reporting, enhanced information on mangroves will help with the coastal and marine components of these updates. At FAO, we work to support countries in sustainable using, conserving and restoring mangrove ecosystems, focusing on building capacity and providing the tools and methodologies necessary for monitoring and reporting. Over the past decade, in fact, we have implemented about 40 mangrove focus projects across 28 countries. Dear friends, this webinar is part of the efforts to responding to the growing demand for support on work related to mangroves through strengthened collaboration with countries, partner organizations and networks, and to improve global and local mangrove monitoring through innovative tools and methodologies. So today, we will hear from experts and stakeholders about their experiences of monitoring mangroves across different scales and methods, from satellites, so from the global perspective, to community-based monitoring. Presenters from Kenya, Myanmar, and Saudi Arabia will share their insights into how monitoring has helped to inform restoration and conservation efforts. I would like to express my appreciation to all our distinguished speakers for their participation and expertise. Monitoring is a crucial step in the sustainable management of mangroves as it allows us to evaluate the success of conservation and restoration efforts, while also providing the data needed to integrate these ecosystems into national climate strategies. This webinar is part of a broader series, in addition to several sessions organized by partners, as FAO, organized by many partners. As FAO, we will organize a follow-up session in early 2025, during which we will dive deeper into mangrove monitoring tools and platforms, offering continued opportunities for learning and collaboration. So today is really to give a first overview of these tools and methods, which will be indeed followed a more in-depth discussion early next year. We hope that today's session will deepen your understanding of the tools available and inspire further collaboration among the countries and partners present. We are thrilled as FAO to provide this platform to discuss the latest tools and methodologies and to share lessons learned from around the world. Thank you very much for being with us. I hope we'll have a very fruitful deliberation and discussion. I will pass the floor back to our moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That was a great introduction. I'd like to now pass the floor to Ken Shono from FAO to set the scene on why we're here. Thanks, Ken.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Arlie, and a very good day to everyone joining us online. So I'd like to start off with an overview by presenting the results of our recent global assessment of mangroves, which was titled The World's Mangroves 2000 to 2020. Next, please. So this, okay. I don't see the control slides. Laura, can you advance the slide? Is it only for me that the slide is not advancing, or is it for everyone?
Okay,
Okay.
I'll be controlling them.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so this initiative was conducted as part of the Global Forest Resource Assessment Remote Sensing Survey 2020. And this survey targeted all forest areas worldwide, but during the process, we noticed that the mangroves were not very well captured because mangroves grow in the sort of the intertidal zone between the terrestrial forest and the marine ecosystem, so it just wasn't very well captured. And given this gap and the importance of mangroves, as mentioned by Thomas, we decided to do a complementary assessment focused on mangroves. Next, please. And the results of this assessment was published in a report that you should see on the screen, yes, on the left-hand side. And we also released an interactive web story on this as well. Next, please. The implementation process of this study involved 48 data interpreters from 26 countries. And this is an important point because this enabled us to engage experts and officials in the countries in image analysis. We derived mangrove strata from available global mangrove mapping products. And in terms of the image data used, we worked with Landsat, NICFI Planet, and Sentinel-2 images. And the interpretation was done using Collect Earth Online. And for this mangrove assessment, we collected data from almost 24,000 sample plots, which were laid out in a randomly, what do you call it? A stratified random design, sample design. Next, please. So I just wanted to show you what the actual interpretation of the sample plots look like. And this one is an example from southern Vietnam. And this is an image from year 2000, where you see healthy mangroves within the hexagon and the landscape. Next, please. Fast forward 10 years to 2010. This is what the landscape and the hexagon plot look like. So there has obviously been a conversion to aquaculture pond. And next slide, please. And this is in 2020, and you see that the whole landscape has been converted. And next, please. And this is what the area looks like on Google imagery. Next. Okay, so one more example. This is an example of a mangrove recovery or regeneration due to restoration efforts. And this one is from Thailand. So in year 2000, within the hexagon plot, you see mostly water. And you go to the next slide. So this is 10 years later, and you see obviously that there's vegetation regrowing within the hexagon plot. And next, please. And this is 2020. Next, please. So if you look at this area from an aerial photograph, it's obvious that there's a significant regrowth of mangroves on abandoned aquaculture ponds. And this has happened because of active restoration efforts by an NGO. Next, please. So yeah, just to quickly run through the key results, our assessment revealed that there was 14.9 million hectares of mangroves in 2020. And as you can see on the bottom, there's quite a variation in terms of the assessment of rose mangrove extent among the different studies, but our results align quite closely with the Global Mangrove Watch 2020 data, which my next speaker will explain. Next, please. And this is the regional distribution of mangroves, with 44% of mangroves being located in South and Southeast Asia. Next. And this is the mangrove area change between the 2 decades that the study covered, from 2000 to 2010 and 2010 to 2020. And what you notice is that while mangrove loss still continues, the rate of loss is slowing down. And another important thing to notice is that there's a significant gains in mangroves as well. So in fact, more than half of the losses were made up or offset by gains. And when you look at these gains, 80% of that came from natural expansion, and the remaining 18% from human-assisted regeneration. And on the other hand, when you look at the losses, 74% were due to human activities. So this implies that if we can just further cut down on the human-induced losses, then mangroves might do just fine in spite of all the climate change threats and the impacts. Next, please. And we also produced some interesting results on the drivers. As you can see, aquaculture is still the leading driver of mangrove losses, but its importance is declining over time. On the other hand, other drivers such as natural retraction, indirect settlement, oil palm, natural disasters, these drivers are increasing in importance. So this is something important to consider when we think about future interventions to improve the management and conservation of mangroves. Next, please. So to conclude with some of the key findings, mangroves are highly resilient. They're very dynamic. It is difficult to predict the effects of climate change on mangroves due to the complex interplay of biophysical factors. Natural expansion and retraction of mangroves should be considered in mangrove monitoring and prioritization of restoration sites. And finally, opportunity to improve mangrove monitoring by combining remote sensing techniques and local expertise should be leveraged. And with that, thank you very much, and turn it back to you already. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ken. So that was a great presentation on a global study, using specific statistical methods to, assess the, the changes and trends of mangroves worldwide. So now we're going to hear from Pete Bunting, who leads Global Mangrove Watch, which is a kind of wall-to-wall mapping approach looking at global mangroves. Over to you, Pete.
Great. Thank you very much. So I do a lot of the data analysis behind the Global Mangrove Watch extent and change layers, but just to acknowledge that people like the Wetlands International and the Nature Conservancy and the Japanese Space Agency also play a big part into this work and providing data, and also the resources that go behind it. If we can change to the next slide. So this work sits under the Global Mangrove Alliance, and the drivers behind this work are the goals that the Global Mangrove Alliance has set, which is this halting anthropogenic loss, restoring half of what's been lost against the 96 baseline, and doubling areas that have been protected. So that's what's driving this work, and you can see some of the members of the Global Mangrove Alliance on the left there. So if we go to the next slide. In terms of how you can interface with the Global Mangrove Watch, one of the most obvious ways at the moment is the portal that we have, so globalmangrovewatch.org. So here you can navigate and have a look at the Global Mangrove Extent data sets, which are currently from 96 to 2020. And we also have these monthly mangrove loss alert products, which covers about 50% of the world's mangroves. And then we have a whole set of other layers, things like blue carbon layers, above and below ground carbon, mangrove height, the restoration potential product that Tom Worthington from University of Cambridge has done, looking at protected areas and other ecosystem services. So that aims to provide this portal of combining lots of global mangrove data sets, such that people can interrogate that and kind of get an overview of what's happening to the world's mangroves. And if we go to the next slide. So just looking at Global Mangrove Extent product. So this is one of the kind of main data sets that the Global Mangrove Watch has been producing for a number of years now. We're on the version 3 of the layers that's currently published. And we're currently working on a version 4, which is an updated methodology. And one of the, I guess, kind of purposes behind this is to create a kind of global methodology. So all countries have had the same remote sensing data analysis applied. So this is using a baseline, which is based primarily off optical data, so Landsat data in the case of version 3. And in the newer version 4, that'll be based off Sentinel-2. And then we use radar data from the Japanese Space Agency to look at the changes in how mangroves are changing through time. And we have these change products from 96 to then 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, And then we jumped to 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And we will be soon releasing products which are kind of after 2020, definitely up until the end of 2023 quite soon, and next year going into 2024. So if we just go to the next step in the slides. So you can just go into the zoom into this figure here. You can see some of the areas and some of the types of change that we're pulling out. So both gains and losses. So if we go to the next slide and just go to the next step of the slides. So what you can see on the left here is an example of Global Mangrove Watch version 3. And one more thing we're trying to do with the new update is to improve the local applicability of the data set. So this is improving the resolution to 10 meters, but also improving the quality of the data. So if you flick to the next step in the slides, then this is an example of version 4. So you see we're capturing the river channels much more clearly. There was an area that was completely missed in version 4, so it's a much more complete map. And this new baseline, the 10-meter baseline, is already available on the Global Mangrove Watch portal. So if we go to the next slide, we also have this product which is monthly loss alerts. So obviously losses can occur very quickly. And what we're wanting to do is to try and provide local and relevant data kind of in a timely manner. So this analysis runs every month. And every month the portal again gets updated using the latest alert. So this is based off the European Space Agency Sentinel-2 data. We currently process about half the world's mangrove areas. In the figure in the bottom right, you can see the blue boxes. They're the areas that we're currently covering, and we hope by this time next year we'll be having global coverage of that. You can see on the left-hand side there, this is a case study from an area in Guinea-Bissau, where a new dam was built for rice cultivation. And you can see through the planet time series there from 2018 up until 22 how those mangroves kind of died back through the hydrological disturbance. And the lower image is the picture of the Earth Dam. And then you can also see the kind of alerts that were picked up, some kind of very near the beginning, and then as the dieback, more alerts were identified. So we go to the next slide. As part of this focus on trying to improve the kind of local applicability of the Global Mangrove Watch rather than just having this global overview, Tom Worthington from the University in Cambridge and others have developed this mangrove restoration tracker tool. So this is available through the Global Mangrove Watch platform, where you can actually record your restoration efforts and how they're progressing, but where they are, and you have control of that data. But some of that data can then be made available so people can understand what other restoration efforts are happening in an area, how successful they've been, and things like learning from others in terms of how those are progressing. So that's something that is now available, and we're hoping that people will pick up and use. So if we go to the next slide. So as part of the Global Mangrove Watch and the Global Mangrove Alliance, we make available a whole number of different reports and various literature that you might find useful. So if you just click to the next bit. Yeah, so the latest one is we have the State of the World's Mangrove Reports 2024. The QR code on the slide here will take you straight to the link where you can download that. And you can find out more about our version 4 products, but also a whole number of case studies about what's happening with Global Mangrove Watch data and how it's being used. But we also produce another more literature, so things like how is the Global Mangrove Watch can be used for the Ramsar Convention and reporting and things like that. So I would encourage people to do have a look at some of those data and some of those reports. So if we skip to the next slide. I think you have to press it again, sorry. Just to highlight, as part of the Global Mangrove Alliance, we also have regional chapters through which we provide training in terms of the Global Mangrove Watch tools and data sets, and trying to help people to connect more locally with these tools. And finally, the next slide. So just to highlight that the Global Mangrove Alliance has these goals that you'll see as goals 1, 2, and 3 there. And to realise that, there's this project that's been tried as the Mangrove Breakthrough, and this is really trying to realise those goals, partly through financing, but also kind of through kind of collective action. And this is an area where there's a lot of growth, and I think you'll be hearing a lot more about the mangrove breakthrough going forward. So on that note, I'll hand back to the moderator.
Thanks so much, Pete. I think that was great. That gives us a nice overview of the dynamics of mangroves as seen specifically from remote sensing, and a lot of other great tools that have been developed as part of that project. Following up then on these kind of remote sensing based approaches, we'll now hear from Andreas Vollrath from FAO on the tools being developed through CPOL, a free open source cloud program that is that can be used to access and analyze satellite imagery. And Andreas will tell us how that can be applicable to mangroves. Thanks, Andreas.
Really for the introduction. I'm a forestry officer here at FAO with a remote sensing background, and I'm giving this presentation on behalf of the whole CPOL team about, as already mentioned, tools that can be used to map and monitor mangroves. Next slide, please. The CPOL platform is part of a bigger suite of open source monitoring tools. One has been already mentioned in the slides of Kenichi, is Collect Earth Online and Collect Earth, which are both two software packages. One is a desktop, one a web-based platform that allows for visual interpretation and sampling. There's also EarthMap that focuses more on the visualization of global data layers, for example, the Global Mangrove Watch. And then the CPOL platform, which I will focus on today, which allows you to process your data on your own. And then there are also other tools around national forest interest inventories. If you're curious about those, go to the website Open Forest. Next slide, please. So what is CPOL? CPOL is you can imagine it as kind of a desktop Earth observation processing software brought to the cloud. So it's a web-based cloud platform. You can reach it through cpol.io as in your browser. So you access it through the browser. And its intent really is to democratize the access and processing and analysis of satellite data, which in terms of volume just exploded throughout the last 10 years. And the aim really is to give people the tools at hand to conduct autonomous land monitoring. It's free and open. By now, we have more than 10,000 users registered worldwide. And it really also is a collaborative effort, mainly by our donor NICFI, but then we also do collaborate, for example, with Space Agency for the access to data, private partners such as Google and Amazon for using functionalities from their platforms. But then also, for example, research institutions to implement state-of-the-art algorithms for mapping and monitoring, not just mangroves, but in general, as well as, for example, players such as Silver Carbon for capacity building that we do together with them. Next slide, please. The main sources of data are basically optical and radar data. So one of the first one is the Planet NICFI data, so very high resolution data that allows for wall-to-wall mapping. Nowadays what's called medium resolution data, so 10 to 30 meter based on Sentinel-2 and Landsat data, but then also radar data such as the Sentinel-1 and the ALOS KNC mosaics that we just heard from Pete, that also used, for example, for mangrove mapping and monitoring because of their specific way they interact with the Earth. They're quite useful data sets in this realm. Next slide, please. CPOL for mangroves. So we do provide advanced functionalities to process the data. So the first thing that usually you have to do is to composite cloud-free mosaics or to get radar mosaics over a larger extent, especially if you look into national mapping campaigns. You can easily combine different sensors, which is a huge benefit for mapping and monitoring mangroves. And the aim really is, in general for CPOL, but also specifically in the case of mangroves, is to create locally relevant maps. I think in one of the slides of Pete was mentioned also that with the same effort that can be put in a global map, if you can put this into a national map, usually results are better. In a national context, if you put this effort there, you likely can produce maps that more represent the national circumstances. Yeah, and it's really there to empower users to create their own maps and data. Next slide, please. We have quite an intuitive user interface where you can easily visualize the data, also different data sets. So for example, here you can see a mixture of optical and radar data, as well as a classification that really should make it easy to work with this vast amount of data. Next slide, please. And I was mentioning before, so we really try to downscale from global data sets to local use. We will see, for example, in the next presentation about Kenya, how we use global products to, for example, create training data, where we combine multiple layers to create high confidence in what might be mangrove, what is not mangrove. And so basically you can both do point-based as well as wall-to-wall mapping. And therefore we leverage this global data sets such as Global Mangrove Watch, but also other data, and are able to improve classification. And one important aspect is also the temporal relevance, because for the years of interest, there might not always be data available. So in this case, we definitely rely on the own elaboration of data. Next slide, please. And since our world is changing continuously, so the satellites that do revisit the Earth with a specific periodicity, it is a good tool to create time series and see how areas are changing. And so there's a lot of functionality around this also in CPOL. One of the examples is, for example, the CCDC algorithm that allows you to create what's called synthetic time series. You can see an example here on the right. But it also allows you to do change detection, to do land cover classification. And we even use this, for example, for near real-time monitoring and disturbance mapping. Next slide, please. So if you get curious and you haven't used CPOL so far, please go to cpol.io and have a look, get registered. If you need some help on getting started, you can go to the documentation page. And if you need support, you can also then contact the Google group. That's it from my side. Thank you so much, and back to Orly.
Thanks so much, Andreas. Yeah, well done. So I think we have a nice presentation from the global statistics, then the global mapping, and then the importance to downscale that for local initiatives. And letting people create their own mangrove maps, understand mangroves in their country, where they can do activities, restoration, interventions, and so on. And it's great that we have these freely available tools to support this. So thanks so much for presenting that, Andreas. So now, given that we need to harness these available data sets and create locally relevant data, we're now going to go into the case study component of our session. And so we will first hear from Kenya. Faith and Marceline will talk about some of the relevant work going on in there, notably mapping, area estimations for monitoring, reporting, and verification, or climate or emissions reduction projects. Over to you.
All right, good afternoon and good morning to all of you, and thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Faith Mutweri, from working with Kenya Forest Service as a GIS and remote sensing officer. So at this point, I'm going to present about the mapping mangrove in Kenya. with my colleague Marceline, we will take over at some point. And this is the work that we have done as the government of Kenya through a multi-stakeholder process with many government institutions and also the private sector and the other international organizations like FAO with support from UK Pact. So maybe on your right, you see the work of Mangrove, and also we've tried to do also a mapping with the in-country data on where our species are. We have 9 species in the country and so forth. Next, please. So specifically to this, it's good to know that each country has a dream to have a very good mangrove map for monitoring the mangroves or any other natural resource. So previously in the country or in Kenya, as you see the diagram there, is that you have been using the supervised classification. And this is a semi-automatic generated reference data whereby we have a lot of satellite data information. And also this is done through a pre-processing and then the feature extraction. This is by collecting some of the sample data. Also looking at other information like the NDVI, this is the normalized the difference vegetation indexes, to look at them. And then combination of these images and the reference data, then we, through a machine learning, we generate maps and then do an accuracy assessment to estimate on how accurate these maps are, and finally do some area estimates, which means the outcome is a map and also that shows the areas and the changes of these mangroves. Next, please. Now, what we have trying to do with FAO, as the earlier presenters talked about, is we have done a comparison of what the global maps do, as well as also combining with the country data to improve the mapping of the mangroves. Now, focusing on the area that is highlighted in red, you can see we have looked at many. This is the 4 global mangrove products, and one of them is the European Space Agency, the World Cover. And then the Global Mangrove Watch, as earlier presented, the Giri et al. 2010 and the Spalding et al. 2013. Now, looking at all these data sets, the first thing that we do is look at where there is a mangrove agreement, meaning that where does all these data sets look and say that this area has got mangrove. And also the non-mangrove agreement, this means that the areas that where all the products have said that this is not a mangrove area. So this is the first data set where we do this an iteration as the first data set and generate sample points from the mangrove agreement areas and the non-mangrove agreement areas. Now, next is to have to look, because there are some of the areas that have got some disagreements. Maybe in one global data set says no, and another one says yes. And we generate automatically we add the training points by hand. This means it's manually by saying, let's add training points here for interpretation. And all this interpretation is done through collected online. And using these sample points and the products selected from the Mangrove Watch, they are subjected to machine learning. And we have a local refined product that combines both the global data sets as well as the locally done data sets by hand or by locally, and then we have a final product also. So this comes as a further refined, improved information or a mangrove maps and a time series of the same. Next, please. One of some of the algorithms that you use is a tasseled cap, whereby with a remote sensing technique that uses the analysis, and this is for analyzing the vegetation area. Of course, there are many others that can be done, but the one that we have done and found that it is working is a tasseled cap. So on the left, we have the Landsat a composite, which is red, green, and blue, RGB, which is around the Mombasa, one of the cities in Kenya, where the mangrove is. And on the right, it's a tasseled cap composite of just the same image. So we run the same image in the tasseled cap, and it has got 3 components that gives us the brightness, which gives in red, and then we have the greenness in green, and the wetness that gives us in blue. So you see this tasseled cap separates the areas very well, where there is the water, where is the mangrove or other vegetation. Next. So at this particular point where we have the results, I'll hand over to Marceline, my colleague from DRSRS, to continue and give us the results on what we did from the using the methodology that I just described. Marceline.
Thank you very much, Faith. My name is Marceline Ojwala, and I'm working with the Directorate of Resource Surveys and Remote Sensing. I'll be picking up from where she has left to elaborate further on what we did in our classification. Just like she had mentioned, and from the previous slide, I would like to mention that one of our forest strata in the country is called coastal forest, which is very close to the mangroves, and therefore differentiating the two visually becomes very difficult. And that's why we opted for using the tarsal cap method, so that we are able to differentiate the spectral signatures for the mangroves and for the coastal forest. We are having shown in the screen there is how we were able to do our shown for the mangrove areas, and then for the other categories as well as water. And you are using Landsat images because I'm interested in the historical years. So the one that was available. After doing our
Hello, Marceline. We're having a hard time hearing you. Would you mind closing your camera, please? Or maybe Faith could take over the rest of the presentation. We can't hear what you're saying.
Okay.
And try to close the microphone, close the camera. And if
Is
not,
that
maybe
better?
Faith. Can
Is
you
that
please
better?
stop your camera?
Is that
There we
better?
go. Yeah, that's better.
Is that better?
Yes, that's great. Please continue.
Oh, sorry for that. Okay, I was talking about using the CDC algorithm to do segmentation for us to be able to do change detection and look at various activities. And therefore, the CDC algorithm per se is able to create a continuous change detection by fixing a linear regression for monitoring. And therefore, you can be able to see the changes between time 1 and time 2. And therefore, in this context, we were looking at the different changes in terms of brightness, in terms of greenness, and as well as also in terms of wetness. Next slide, please. As I have mentioned, that the CDC is able to monitor changes from time 1 to time 2. So, for example, what we are showing in the image showed on the screen is a point where some restoration activities had taken place by some organization. The graph, it is showing the trend, how the trend of that particular point shown on the screen was increasing. And that's how we were able to use CDC in our context. That is just an example of the change detection using CDC. Next slide, please. We were also able to use a coded tool or coded algorithm for change detection again per se, and therefore in this regard, we were combining the different classification for 2 times as well as the CDC, and therefore we are able to show areas where there was some loss in mangroves, where there was some sort of degradation, areas that remained stable, as well as regeneration, and also areas where there were some gain. Next slide, please. So coming to results on area estimation, we applied the good practice guidelines of IPCC as well as GFY so that we could be able to generate our areas under mangroves as well as other classes accompanying this. And then the main motivation behind the work that we were doing is because we needed to have specific emission factors for the mangrove areas separate from the other forest strata that we have in the country. However, the challenge that we were having is that our area under mangrove is not as huge as other forest strata it is very small. However, the same, we still need to have emission factors so that we are accurately report for this particular ecosystem. And therefore, based on the change assessment from our results, we were able to have a new elaborated mangrove stratum, and then also a continuous layer of likelihood of change stratified area estimate, which is unbiased. And because I've talked about our area under mangrove being so small, we only had 1,800 points being analyzed or interpreted. And this gave us a total area of around 60,000 hectares confirmed to be under mangrove. And we also observed that there was very low change. This confirms effectiveness of the policies that are being implemented in this particular area. And then our results are yet to be verified. We have not validated the results on the ground as per se. And with that, I say thank you.
Thank you so much, Marceline. It was a great example of how we can use these tools to really understand specific mangrove dynamics in Kenya. Thanks so much. Let's move on to Myanmar, over to Asia for Lorena and Patrick. So Lorena will discuss a methodology for assessing mangroves in Myanmar, and Patrick will talk a little bit more about the community forest boundary mapping. Over to you, thanks.
Hello, everyone. Now we will address the monitoring of mangroves at national scale, as we did in Myanmar under UN RED. First, we check some of the most relevant historical, global, and national mangrove datasets for the country, and saw important differences both in distribution and in area. For example, in the Yarwadi region, the mangrove area in the national map is around 30% less than in the global maps, while in Taninjari is 10% greater. These products, apart from giving us a first glimpse of mangrove presence in the country, are very useful as initial training data source to build more accurate maps at national level. In this way, we map the extension of mangroves for the 1st of January of the years 2016 and 2021, and the changes between both dates for the full country, based on time series analysis of Landsat 8 and Sentinel-1. This is supported as a national scale for the mangrove forests. For two regions, mangrove classes and biomass change estimation were also mapped using data from the National Forest Inventory. The optical and radar time series and the digital elevation model were analyzed with the continuous change detection and classification algorithm. CCDC modeling considers annual seasonality and interannual trends and identifies land cover changes as persistent anomalies. All the software tools employed were free and open source and mostly part of the Open Forest Toolkit. CPAL for modeling time series, Collector for sampling data collection, and Google Earth Engine for classification, although now this can also be done in CPAL. Here we have an example of a possible flood in February 2016 and a conversion to cropland in November of 2021. And this is the CCDC model of NDVI. The breaks are those potential land cover changes between the stable time periods, and we can extract the model parameters for any date to get a classification. And this is what is called CCDC slices. Now, to pass from the model at the top to the classification at the bottom, we generated a mangrove non-mangrove mask from the global and national data sets and collected training data using a stratified random sampling. We classified the model with a supervised classification based on random forest in probability of mangrove presence. to finally get our mangrove map applying certain rules. Then we improved the classification, collecting additional training data over uncertain areas, both possible overestimations and underestimations by national experts in collectors through visual interpretation of very high resolution imagery, including planet data and time series of vegetation indices. We checked that visual validation of these uncertain areas had a big impact in shaping the result. They show that mangroves in Myanmar increased in overall almost 1.3% during the 5 years, but this trend differs among regions. So Rakhine had an annual net increase rate of circa 1%, while Ayeyarwady an annual net loss of almost 1%. In comparison to other sources, our results of 2016 are more aligned with the national land use map than the global maps. This map can be visualized in this web explorer. Here you have on the top the link. So you can see the mangrove extent for 2016, 2021, and the changes. And other products are also available for comparison. Banting, Giri, CIMA, and the national maps. Also, the region boundaries from which the areas can be extracted. You can also be directed to example of location with changes, like this clear cut for agricultural expansion in firewood collection in Ayeyarwady. And planet imagery is also available as a background for both dates. To conclude, I will just highlight that this methodology is effective for mapping dynamic ecosystems as seasonal and trend temporal information is used in the classification and is robust for mapping forests both at single dates and changes between 2 days, as time series models are used in the classification and these are unique. And this avoid stochastic change or atmospheric changes when using independent time series for both years. So many thanks. Yes.
Thanks a lot, Lorena. Over to you. So that was a nice way to show how we can see the specific changes, at a pixel level, in mangroves and the different approaches for change detection. Now Patrick will complement with some of the ways you can support community forest boundary mapping in Myanmar. Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, hello everybody. So I want to take you from the national and province level, which was presented, to the very local level actually. And I will present a methodology we, together with partners and community forestry user groups, have developed to kind of more efficiently map community forest boundaries, especially in mangrove areas. Next. So basically, for those who don't know what community forests are, the community forests in a nutshell are basically an instrument where local communities are granted resource use rights and management rights over the local forest areas. Community forests really have been proven that they can be a highly effective way to empower communities, protect forests, especially also mangroves, and sustain livelihoods. And community forests are actually implemented in different shapes and different forms and rules in many, many countries all over the world. And in Myanmar, since around 1995, with a push starting more or less in 2010, and increasingly covering mangrove forest areas. Community forests usually, as I say, are area-based. So it's really important to kind of know what are the boundaries of those community forests to actually have effective monitoring, to have effective management, to use them, for example, for RD plus schemes and so on. Yeah. Unfortunately, in Myanmar, as in many other countries, at least in Southeast Asia, boundary data for CFs or for community forests are often either not available or of rather poor quality, inaccurate, or not at scale, which would be fit for purpose for many, many activities, including carbon monitoring, for example. Next slide. And because of this, CDE and partners can have developed and implemented methodology to more reliably and effectively really map those boundaries and document them. Next slide. So basically, it's summing up first the CFUT user group, so basically community forest user group, and looking at existing boundary reference data. So often there is like a map already available from a certificate or from a management plan, but as mentioned, those maps are often very rough, inaccurate, not fit for purpose, but it starts with those. Then the methodology would go really as a combination of scale mapping, GPS mapping, and a standardized documentation process. The first step is you would use large-scale vinyl maps, usually using Google satellite imagery as a background, and together with a community forest user group, they would identify the community forest boundary segment. So it's a segment-based approach, and especially mangrove areas, boundaries very often follow tidal channels or follow, for example, the boundary between mangrove forest and agricultural area and those things. And those boundary segments are very easily identifiable on those maps and are kind of drawn and identified and mapped on those maps. In the same process, unclear segments, so segments which do not follow natural features, or where the community maybe can't really remember sometimes where the boundary are, or where you have different versions of it. Those are also identified and marked for a field survey. So basically, for those segments which cannot be easily identified, for those, then you have to have a GPS field survey. So basically, you have a standardized way where you kind of mark your point. You go in the field with a community forest user group or representatives of those. They kind of identify the point, and then you describe textual how the boundary looks like between point A, point B, point C. So for example, from point B to point C, the boundary follows a small creek, or from point B to point C, it follows a straight line, and so on. So basically, those segments which can't be easily identified on scale maps are mapped in the field by the CF user group. As a third process or third step in the process, the GPS data from the field plus results from the scale mapping are brought together, presented to the community forest user group, cleaned up, and then the boundary is documented in a textual form. So basically, the most important thing is really the boundary is described in a point segment based way in a textual form. And of course, the GPS points where they were needed are also recorded. The results are also, let's say, either authorized or acknowledged or endorsed by the community. As a last step, to really make those results reliable, credible, and more useful for everybody is that those results are, let's say, documented in a boundary dossier, which is quite standardized. So this one is using the government or authority defined minimum scale of maps. It's kind of described the boundary documentation in there. And it also includes a map, but this map is basically there to kind of visualize the documented boundary in textual and coordinate form. Next slide. As a result, you can see here, this one is usually maps or boundaries as they are available already. So they are quite rough, as you can see. So often like in certificate maps or management maps, you have those, but those are really not fit for purpose. If you want to implement management activities, if you want to kind of see for RTD projects and so on. The result of our process, next slide. The result of our process, as you can see here, is this boundary segments of this community forestry. So you can see here, the boundary is like we have pink and red lines, and they are much more refined than the ones from the original certificate maps. And this one is really up for purpose. The good thing also is about the segment-based boundary mapping, that you can add additional metadata for each segment. So for example, if for some reason you were not able to really reliably map a certain segment, so you can kind of mark this segment as not 100% reliable, for example, or you also can sometimes include.
When I give you counsel, you tell me what we say.
Sometimes you can include de facto boundaries or legal boundaries. So often communities have the de facto boundary, what they really conserve as a community forest, and then there's the boundary which has been granted by, for example, the forest department. So using a segment-based approach, you really can include those information in the standardized way. Next slide, please. So to sum it basically up, this kind of boundary mapping methodology is quite fit for purpose because it gets your boundaries in, like, say, 1 to 10,000 or to 5,000 scale. Using the textual boundary description, you can also easily reconstruct the boundary in the field if you need it at higher accuracy, for example. It's a quite efficient way. So we've been testing and using it, and 1 CF in a mangrove areas usually takes around 1 day. If the area is much bigger, requires more field survey. If the boundaries are not clear, it might take a bit longer. But for most of the ADCS we have been mapping, it took more or less 1 day per CF. Yeah. It's all quite flexible in a way because you can use the same methodology in the beginning. So basically when you apply for CF, as well as when you kind of just want to remap or kind of improve the boundary documentation of it. And you can also, if you really want to go with a GPS around, you also can just use a standard traditional GPS survey methodology for it as well. Yeah. Since it's using a standardized documentation process where actually the process itself is documented as well, it's not just a map and the coordinates, it's really a standardized dossier saying who was involved, when was it done, it's signed by the CFUG, it's kind of following a standard methodology. So the result actually can or is often trusted by the authorities as well. You can, of course, also, if possible, include someone from the forest department in the process to make it even more trustable. And as I say, it's quite feasible. It's not high tech. It's really low tech. It's quite simple, I would say. Local CSOs, NGOs with some training, as long as they have GPS and map reading skills, can actually implement this methodology and facilitate this process with a community forestry user group. So next slide, basically. So this is the end of my presentation. And I hope it's interesting. If any questions, please reach out to us.
Thanks so much, Patrick. I think that's a really great segue to show how, really local scale information is also important that, might not be covered by global data. And it's really great what you said that, local people really can be the best stewards of their local ecosystems, right? They stand to benefit the most from them. And I think they have the most incentive to protect them. So that's a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that. We will now go over to Saudi Arabia with Dr. Saleh Al-Zamanan, to talk more about the restoration efforts going on in Saudi Arabia.
Hi, Ardelie, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
We still have to go to the third speaker on Myanmar.
Okay, sorry.
Tia.
Oh, sorry. Oops, my apologies. Sorry, my apologies, Tia.
No problem at all.
On the work at the
I thought I've been put on different session of the webinar. No problem at all. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Tia, a former national consultant on community forestry at FAO, currently with Andaman Capital Partners, which is a private entity, so managing a community center mangrove restoration project in the Ayeyarwady Territory. So welcome to my presentation titled Enhancing Community Capacity for Community Forest-Based Enterprise in the Ayeyarwady Territory, which is some kind of departure from the previous presentation, but I still think it's quite relevant to the overall scope of the webinar. So I will be sharing insight from our capacity building work with a focus on community center enterprises in mangrove forest area. Next, please. It's very important to note that the success of our capacity building work was largely dependent on these partnerships. Our main partner was the Myanmar Environment Rehabilitation Conservation Network, which is a network of approximately 30 local NGO and CSO with expertise in community forest and community forest-based enterprise. MAN has also been the key implementation partner for UNDP, which is the other executive agency of this technical assistance. FAO partnered with MAN from 2021 to 2024, focusing on community-led forest and land management models. UNEP, WCMC, so World Conservation Monitoring Committee, another executive agency of the technical assistance, provided technical support for REDD+ safeguards training, which is crucial to the FAO-MAN partnership. Next, please. Yes, in 2021, we launched our first capacity building package, which included identification of potential community forest area. So you can see on the right in the photo. So we walked along the proposed boundary of community forest, and also assess their natural and social conditions. Another one is the development of awareness raising plan and distribution of information materials, emphasizing on mangrove conservation and management, and development of terms of reference on governance for community forest user group, which is to set the stage for the future formal recognition. Next, please. In 2022, we launched the second capacity building package, which with particular focus on REDD+ safeguard and business planning. We conducted 2 trainings or trainer sessions on REDD+ safeguard for MAN staff with technical support from WCMC or UNEP. And we also conducted introductory training on REDD+ safeguards for this community forest user group. We also developed the draft guidelines for the preparation of mangrove sphere management plan with the input of community. 2 community forest user groups were supported with training in market analysis and development and business plan development. Next, please. By 2023, we introduced livelihood support activities. We call it CFE initiative, complementary to mangrove sustainable management and conservation. We provided theoretical and hands-on training in crab fattening and to 2 community forest user groups. We also distributed the materials, import materials, about $7,000 worth. And we also developed the guidelines for CF management plan and also finalized it and also distributed among forestry stakeholders. We also organized a mangrove forum in Yangon for the community forest user group from 3 coastal regions of Myanmar. So this forum allowed community forest user group share their experience, success story, and exchange knowledge on community forest-based enterprise. They also identify the areas for collaboration. Next, please. In 2024, we scaled up the initiative. 5 community forest user group were trained. They were provided the same training in market analysis and development. They were supported in business plan development. We also distributed the import materials for crab fattening in community forest. And we also supported the development of 5 community forest business plan. So that these plans already now in operation. Next slide, please. So this is the summary of the community forest user group. They received the support from the technical assistant. So as you see, the beneficiary list is quite small. But we still think the impact was quite effective. Next, please. And this may show the location of where we work for the last 3 years. So as you can see, so all are located in the southern edge of the Ayeyarwady Delta. Well, they are quite accessible by car and motorcycle compared to the other community forests into the west of the Ayeyarwady region. Next, please.
Dr. T, I'm just letting you know that you have 1 minute left. Okay, thanks.
So we also had the project impact assessment mission recently in early September. So all the community confirmed that crab fattening is an emerging viable livelihood option. with the potential sustainable economic sustainability. So, but they also provided their issues such as the shortage of the young crab. So, and they also mentioned that they would like to pursue the additional livelihood by support activities such as the making soap and the drying the knee bulbs. Next, please. So we witnessed that all CFUG are doing well with their business implementation plan. So they have already harvested the first catch of the crab. So the following catches will follow until early 2025. Next, please. So this is what we think. Like we got the community input on that one. So they did the further training. They also need the further technical and finance support from the project. So they also think that their CF management plan should be revised so that they can incorporate their business plan into the current existing CF management plan. Next, please. Okay, this is where we work, but I would like to highlight. So the technical assistance focus only on the eastern part of the ERD delta, but there are many CF. As you see on the map, 58 CF remain and supported. So a lot of work to do to improve the livelihood of this community. Next, please. Thank you very much. So this is the end of my presentation. Back to you, Aurelie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, what a nice complimentary presentation on really specifically local activities to support mangroves in Myanmar. Thanks so much, Dr. Tiha. We will now go over to Dr. Saleh from Saudi Arabia to talk about restoration efforts, which a lot of you have been addressing in the Q&A. Thanks for your interest, and over to you, Dr. Saleh.
Hello, everyone. I'm with you, Dr. Saleh Al-Zamanan. I'm the director of Mangrove Forest in Saudi Arabia. With you and Dr. Mohammed. Really, it's my honor to be a speaker today at the workshop organized by FAO and to share global experience. So we are achieving one of the goals of Sustainable Development, SDG, to exchange knowledge and experience among each other. So today we'll cover our strategy, plan, project, activities in Saudi Arabia. Next, please. Saudi Arabia has a great vision to protect and develop vegetation cover, include forest, and for sure, mangrove forest part of that. So, NCPC was established few years ago to develop unsustainable mangrove ecosystem. Actually, Saudi Arabia, home of two species of mangrove along two coastal, Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf coastal, dominated by Avicennia marina species, which cover 95% of our mangrove. Here you can see it in the map. The other species is Rhizophora, just in Red Sea and 13 sites. If you compare between North Red Sea and South Red Sea coastal, you will see that mangrove has more density and highest because many factors like fresh water, which comes by wadis from the mountains, and lower salinity and lower waves. Now, I will let our expert, Dr. Mohammed Awad, to explain you more about our strategy, plan, the project. The floor is yours, Dr. Mohammed.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saleh. Next, please. Okay, this picture shows that we have three species of mangrove, Rhizophora and Avicennia. And actually, the total land cover of the mangrove is estimated approximately 20,000 hectares. But currently, we have a project to get the accurate estimation of mangrove. Next, please. Next. Actually, one of the most important challenges facing the mangrove plantation and mangrove natural forest is climate change and anthropogenic and human activities. But now the government has very strict regulations to protect mangrove from human activities. But the most important factor that affecting mangrove natural forest and plantation is extreme temperature, which exceeds 55 degrees in Arabian Gulf and 45 degrees in Red Sea. And another factor is salinity. Salinity is very high in Arabian Gulf, sometimes also exceeds 80 PSU, and in the Red Sea is 45 PSU. That's why we are concentrating most of our plantation in the Red Sea, and mainly in the south and western. And the most, next please. This picture showing that the degradation that happened by natural factors and also by camel grazing and sand movements, both human activities and natural factors. Next, please. Next. This is the strategy of these are the steps that we follow for the plantation. Firstly, actually, we go for the selection of the sites. As mentioned that in the first slide, that we have total coastal area in Arabian Gulf and Red Sea, approximately 2,030 kilometers, but some areas are inaccessible, so we cannot go for that. And we have degraded sites, so we are mostly focusing on the rehabilitation of the degraded sites, and also we go for afforestation. For the degradation, we immediately go for the plantation, but for the afforestation, we do at first small-scale experiments to test the site, then we go for the plantation, and these are the steps we follow. At first, we select the sites based on some criteria. We have very long criteria. We can just exchange this information through email to get more information about our process for the selection of sites, because in the Red Sea, we have corals, we have submarine Arabian Gulf, so these areas are not potential for the plantation. We have some potential areas on the Red Sea because salinity is fine, but we have some limitation of alleviation. So we test first, we make small-scale experiments to ensure that the site is potential, then we go for the plantation. Because for each project, we have a capacity of 1 million to 2 million planting trees. So we do experiments at first before going for the large scale. For the seed selection, we select the seeds from the similar climate condition, and then we plan to have more chance of success of the plantation. For the nurseries, we have some requirements. After planting the seeds, we have some requirements, like the age should be 6 to 8 months to have the optimal height and stem diameter. Then we go for the transplanting. And the picture below showing that one of the successful projects that we have done previously. Go to the next, please.
If you could kindly start closing up your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. This is showing us that the instruction, the nursery systems, and one of the innovative procedure for the nursery selection. We have some problems to establish nursery in the sea. So now we have backshore nursery or land nursery to produce the seedlings, and this is very successful actually case. And in most of the Northern Sea part, we have now we started to produce seedlings through the system to have very fast growth seedlings. Then we go for transplanting. Go to the next, please. This is also mangrove nurseries. Most of the nurseries with a capacity of 50 to 500,000 to 1 million trees. This is pictures selected from different sites along the Red Sea. Go to the next. This picture also showing two cases before and after. This is the degraded site, and now it is converted to rehabilitated site, and it is ongoing now, this project. Go to the next. This showing us the ongoing projects: Jubail in the Arabian Gulf, Tabuk in north of the Red Sea, and Arais is afforestation site, and it's one of the most successful projects that we have in the Red Sea. Go to the next. And this one of the successful projects in the southern part of the Red Sea. Is completed 4 years ago, and now we just do monitoring to check the progress of the projects. Go to the next. This is a picture showing us our integrated team members. And we have research scientists, technicians, specialists, and we do both. They are supervising the projects and doing research work. Go to the next. Okay, now I just let Dr. Salih to conclude about the sharing or engagement of community in Saudi Arabia within the mangroves.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Finally, we work hand by hand with the local community and engage them to be friends of mangrove. So we celebrate Mangrove Day annually on 26th of July in different cities and support beekeepers to produce honey from our lovely trees. Now, I will let you to watch a video what you produce this year in our Mangrove Day. So please press the video. Next. Yes, some picture of our celebrations in different cities.
We're really gonna have to wrap it up. Sorry. If you could quickly finish, thank you.
Yeah, this is some picture of our celebration. And can you please just let the others to watch our video in the last slide? It's just 2 minutes here.
Maybe we can share the link in the chat so people can watch the video.
Yeah, click on the screen.
Yep.
And this video, when we produce it, you know, more than 8 million viewers just in the first day to educate people about mangrove and yes.
Sorry.
That's really
I'm
great.
having
Thank you,
trouble.
Dr. Saleh. We will share the link in the chat so that you can people can view that. But that's I think that's great outreach, great communication. You know, something we don't really usually associate Saudi Arabia to mangrove ecosystems, but I think you've showed us a lot of really great science and research and in practice evidence on restoring mangroves, which is a very lively discussion in the Q&A. Thank you so much to my colleagues from Saudi Arabia. So thank you for all those really interesting case studies. Please continue to ask questions in the chat or sorry, in the Q&A box. We'll now bring this all together from a global policy perspective with Bomsik from the Ramsar Convention. Over to you. There'll be no presentation. He'll just be talking.
Thank you very much. And I realize that I'm going to be the last speaker. I'll be very quick so that we can go ahead and move into the really interesting question and Q&A session. But just to link the discussions between the monitoring and the global the processes, the monitoring has been an important part of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. If you really go back, the convention realized the importance of monitoring and keeping inventory of wetlands from the very first meeting of the Convention on Wetlands in first COP in 1980. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands has asked the countries to prepare wetlands, and this wetland inventory has become a priority since COP7 in 1999. So you can see that inventory, the Convention on Wetlands has realized that monitoring, keeping inventory of wetlands is crucial in the effective management of any wetlands, especially for a crucial ecosystem such as mangrove. It has been a key target of the current strategic plan, and we're working on our 5th strategic plan now. And I'm pretty sure that this will be another key target for the strategic plan going forward. And 172 contracting parties to the convention are mandated to include wetland inventory information, including mangroves, in their national report, which they submit to the Conference of the Parties every 3 years. And so it's not just keeping track of mangroves. It is a mandate that has been given to the 172 contracting parties to report to the international community every 3 years. So the work that you're doing is very, very crucial for the implementation of the convention. And mangroves has been an important wetland ecosystem for the convention. We had the first resolution on mangroves in COP8 in 2002. So this goes really a long way ago. And currently we have, as you probably know, as Ramsar sites or wetlands of international importance, which the convention keeps track and log of. There's 2,523 sites, and around 40% of all these sites are marine and coastal wetlands, including mangroves. And we see that there's an increasing number of mangrove sites in Ramsar sites. And as you know, because of climate change and the role that mangroves has in climate adaptation and as well as mitigations, we're seeing that mangroves are becoming more important in national climate plans for many countries. We see that inclusion of wetlands in NDC has doubled since 2020. And I think around 46% is mentioning blue carbon ecosystems. A lot of, among the blue carbon, mangroves are gaining, it probably has gotten the most attention. We looked at GCF and GEF projects recently, and we identified 26 GEF projects and 7 GCF projects focused on mangroves. For that reason, the UNFCCC and under the conventional wetlands, and also for the global biodiversity framework, the conventions are working hard to find advancement in monitoring and keeping inventories. And of course, we'd like to thank our partners, including FAO and our international organization partners, such as IUCN, Wetland International, WWF, who has done a very crucial work on monitoring of mangroves. I think Kenichi Shono has talked about the International Mangrove 2022, which FAO published. There's a red list of mangrove ecosystem, which IUCN published in 2024, and the State of the World Mangrove 2024, which Pete Bunning, our speaker, has already introduced. Along with that, the convention has been working on mangroves through the 2 Ramsar regional initiatives. So first one was established in the Americas region in 2009. And then we have an International Mangrove Center that was established in Shenzhen in 2023. And we're expecting a very huge program on mangrove training and capacity building, and hopefully leading to restoration coming from those 2 Ramsar regional initiatives. We also have STRP plan on understanding the monitoring mechanisms and the conservation of mangroves and wetlands that can help meet climate goals. And we also have a program on national wetland inventories, which we're providing a lot of programs, more extended programs on national wetland inventories, which we believe will help parties on this matter as well. In closing, I'd like to kind of provide my thoughts on the discussions. I think, first of all, is that I can't overemphasize the importance of multi-scale. The example of Myanmar was very interesting, from satellite monitoring to the ground level, and the discussion of community-based approach is very, very interesting. Any high-level resolutions has to be correlated along with the on-the-ground monitoring as well. You see that even restoration, if not done properly, could hamper the effort as well. So that correlation is very, very important. And number 2, if my reflection is that monitoring should not only focus on the extent of mangrove, but it also include drivers as well, drivers that threatens the ecosystems. Sometimes when the climate goals, we start focusing too much on land conservation area and the restoration area, but we need to focus on what are the anthropogenic activities that is causing degradation and destruction of mangroves, and these becomes very important in terms of monitoring as well. And for that reason, mangrove monitoring has to be integrated with national wetland inventory or forestry inventory to the global resolutions to understand what is the driver for the losses and whether we are making a sustainable and continuous restoration. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. That was a great summary, and I like what you said. Exactly, the title of this webinar is multi-scale mangrove monitoring, and we went really from absolute global, covering every mangrove worldwide, to the smallest communities in Saudi Arabia and Myanmar and Kenya. So I think that's really important to address that now. So so thanks again to all of our speakers. We do have a little bit of time if you want to stay a little bit past the hour to discuss some of the questions. We've answered a lot of them in the Q&A. But a big theme I think that's been coming through in the questions is monitoring mangrove restoration, right? So restoration is a big initiative going on. Lots of people planting trees or letting them regrow naturally. There's been a lot of examples in countries where if you just simply enhance natural restoration, you can also get a lot of regrowth that way. So we've showed a little bit how we can monitor this with satellite imagery. We've also mentioned in the chat some of the best practices. You can't just plant mangroves anywhere. You really have to consider the historical relevance, climate change, and so on. But I would like to know, or maybe Ken Shona, would you like to maybe share a couple words on monitoring mangrove restoration? In the global study, you saw that there was some natural regeneration in the global mangrove study. Maybe would you like to share a couple words on that?
Sure. So yeah, we didn't really monitor progress with regards to restoration. But yeah, as I shared, we did look at all the areas where mangroves are regenerating and assess why are they regenerating. But that was an interesting question because both for the losses and gains due to natural reasons, we couldn't really get into what processes are driving those losses and gains. So gains could be due to sediment inputs because of something happening upstream, or losses could be related to sea level rise, but along with other factors as well. So yeah, the next step for us would be to really try to look into those specific locations where mangroves are naturally coming back or naturally going away, and look at why that may be happening. So that's on our agenda for the next assessment, which we are in the process of doing now to update this data to 2025.
Great, thanks, Ken. Looks like maybe we need to have our next webinar specifically on mangrove restoration monitoring and best practices. Once again, we shared a couple links in the chat on the things to consider when performing mangrove restoration. There's a lot of interest also. LOD asks, do we have any statistics on the success of mangrove restoration worldwide? I think that's a very important topic. People do a lot of planting, doesn't mean it's successful. There are several tools out there. So Pete presented the mangrove restoration tool tracker, which is one way. FAO also has the FIRM, part of the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring, where people can input projects, relevant projects and so on into that tool. I'd like to go to the summary slides, Laura. Maybe we can start to wrap up this webinar with the key messages and next steps and ways for you all to get involved. Laura will share her screen and we'll just talk about the summary of the session. So we saw that Ken started out with an example from Collect Earth Online. It's a free tool from the Open Forest Toolbox to help basically, integrate local expertise or experts into validating or assessing mangrove extent and changes. This is done, it can be done online, offline. I encourage you to look up the Open Forest Toolbox. My colleagues will share that in the chat. Then Global Mangrove Watch, presented by Pete Bunting, showed really the foundation for global scale, wall-to-wall, consistent monitoring over time, which lets us see where mangroves are being gained and lost all over the world. building upon that, countries really need their own custom monitoring that can integrate, various data sets and sensors. That can be done using the open forest tools such as CPOL, which is a free cloud platform for accessing and analyzing satellite imagery. I invite you to check it out online. There's lots of resources to get you started. And then we saw the really impacts on the ground for national and local scale monitoring. This is really important for community action, for restoration, for projects, for protection, and that's a crucial element as well. So the key message is that it seems a lot of you are really interested in restoration related monitoring. We're happy to hear that, and we have a series of webinars planned, and we're happy to address this in future sessions. We've seen that global products, they are improving quality and still remain relevant, at some scales. And of course, the national forest inventories, local data are really important for the management and decision making, at the policy level. There's a lot of cloud computing access, many satellite sensors available. That is really easing the mapping of mangroves. As I said, we're lucky that mangroves can easily be discerned with satellite imagery. And it's great to have a nice, consistent view from space or even drones. Some people mentioned in the chat, or airborne sensors. And yeah, there's lots of initiatives ongoing. There's the Global Mangrove Alliance, there's Global Mangrove Watch. There's so many initiatives and the FAO initiatives as well to really help connect people, tools, and collaborators. And as such, we do have some more resources for you in the next slide. So once again, we will share all the presentations of the session. We'll put them on social media. They'll be available to everyone. And we invite you to share those with your colleagues. We do have a online community focused on mangrove monitoring. We shared the link. You can join that, and you can connect with us through the email address listed. We do have follow-up sessions planned, including with the GFOI, the Global Forest Observations Initiative, the Mangrove Breakthrough National Determined Carbonation Task Force, and the Blue Carbon Deck. And once again, yes, some of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. There's a firm site. So there's a framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring. Has a site on where you can share your restoration projects, similar to the MRTT tool. And everyone is really invited to contribute, to discuss, and to continue to really share the enthusiasm and motivation for mapping and monitoring mangroves. So thank you so much for participation. Thank you for coming far and wide, morning and evening, and listening to and thanks again to our wonderful speakers. It was great to have you here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.